Hey guys, how's it going? Here's a bit of footage here which I filmed back in May 2021 where I started two slip joint folding knives. Feather pattern Damascus. I've no more footage than this, I don't think. I can't find it, so we'll go from here. These blades, since this video, were heat treated. The bevels were ground in. I did drill out these liners which are super glued together, just to locate the blade and the spring, and I'm going to take the video on from this point. This is what I'm going to make, this style of slip joint, and again these are feather pattern Damascus, except that the blade shape on this one is just slightly different. If you want to know how to make a template like this for folding knives, I've got a video on it. I'll put a link down below and might put one up in the card there. And I'm also going to do a full playlist on folding knives. So here we go. There we are. The blade is pinned in place. The spring has just got one pin in place on the pivot. First thing I need to do is just check what I've done because I can't remember. I'm just going to check the thickness of the blade and the washers and the spring, because I want the spring to be slightly smaller in diameter than the blade and the two washers, because when the blade is compressed down between the bolsters, I want the spring to be able to move and not have the same compression basically. So I'm just going to measure these up now. 3.9mm thick on that, so that spring needs to be slightly under 3.9mm there, slightly under. It's 3.86. yeah, that's fine. It's got a little warp in it, it's got a bend in it, and it's not the liner. You can see actually, probably see daylight through that if I show. I don't know, maybe you can just see a chink of daylight through the spring, and that means the spring is bent, and it will most probably have bent when I hit it there with the torch. You can see the discoloration, the blue purpley colour there, and that was to get the knife down to the HRC I wanted, about 46 HRC. You can put it on a jig like this and wind it down, but you will see the bend in that direction. Even more so there. And when you take that tension off, I pretty much guarantee that that spring will still have a bend in it. Yeah, it is still there. What I'm going to have to do is put this on this jig and apply some heat, and that's the only way of getting it back to straight again. Now that's the spring straightened out in that direction. It's dead flat now. There was also a very slight curve in that one, which I've also taken out, so I'm glad I checked them. The contact point on the spring is there, so because it's pushing down on that, it's pushing the blade up. That's why there's a slight gap there. You get more push up if it's pushing on that pivoting end there, if you get what I mean. So that's why it's pushing on there, and there's a slight gap there. Also, there's a slight gap there, and it's tight there. And that's where it should be as you grind that off. As I grind that off to fit the spring to the knife, then that gap, well, there shouldn't be a gap basically, but there's relief there underneath so that only that surface is contacting. I'm going to make sure that that spring is in the same position when the knife is open and closed now. So I'm just putting a little bit of tension on the back of the spring with my finger. I'm going to strike a line down there. You see that? I'll turn the knife around and I'll set this to a point where it hits the stop, which will be about there. You can see, we can't see the line, so I'll put another line on there. It wants to be about there somewhere. I'll put another line on, and you will see that one line You'll see one line is slightly off, so it's that closed one that's pushing the spring up a little bit more. Now to get around that, literally all I have to do is grind whatever that was, which is probably a thousandth of an inch, just off that little corner there, so that the spring can drop down, and then it will be in the same position at the top when the knife is open or closed. I'm just going to go and do that. I like to get all this done before I start drilling any pins, fixing the bolsters before I do anything else. For me, that has got to be right at this point. The stop pin should be in place here, but that's the knife open and remarked. I'm just going to close it now to where the stop pin should be, and you will see that the spring now is in exactly the same position. You want it like this so that when the knife is either open or closed, the spring is lying nice and flat at the top with your bolsters and your liners. So what I'm going to do now is drill these holes. I shall possibly drill that one first, and all I will do is, whilst I'm drilling that hole, I'll put some slight tension against that with my finger, because that is the pivot point there. So I'll put some tension on that whilst I'm drilling it, just to keep that tight, like that. Just over here at the pillar drill, so I've got everything snug down there. I guess you could just put a centre punch in that and mark it, but I do like to have this set up tight and in place when I drill them, and that is pretty much good. Just get the hole lined up perfectly, which is there. And your drill bit comes loose. No, it doesn't, it just gets snagged up. Oh, the drill bit has come loose, yeah. Don't worry, I need to get a better chuck key for this chuck. It's just a little bit floppy in there. It's just a very accurate chuck, an old Jacobs. Anyway, I can carry on drilling that now, as is. You do need very sharp drill bits for brass. I don't know why that is, because it's a softish material, but if your drill bits aren't sharp, it drills horribly. Okay, so I've just put the pin in that, and I'm just checking the tension on the spring, which is good, and it's just snapping back again. That's good. I've yet to reduce the thickness of this spring here. I'll just done this once. Anyway, I'll probably grind all that out of there, something like that, because the spring is way too strong at the moment. It'll also be reduced on the spine, as I said, when I come to do the final grinding. So we'll actually have much less steel there by the time I've finished. Yeah, and the reason why I only drill one at a time is if you've messed that one up and it's not drilled in the right place, and let's say your knife is now not snapping back because your hole is too far that way and there's too much slack between your spring and your knife, you can always have another go with this one. So if you enlarge that hole slightly in your liner so that the spring goes further up, you can then put even more tension on the bottom one and re-drill it, so that that one is then the holding pin. That one will just turn into a locating pin along with your pivot pin. Those two are actually enough to hold the spring in place. Okay, so now I've got my spring nice and flat, my second holding pin in place. That's the blade essentially locked up, and I think I've just got a little bit too much push up on the back of the folder there. Ideally you want the push up on the spring to be approximately half the spring width, so that's going to be the top of the spring there. That's the base, That's approximately halfway. Now you can go just slightly under that or up to halfway. I'm just going to check this because I think there's going to be more than, it's going to be more than halfway. You can see that or not. It is, it's on the halfway line, but it's slightly above the halfway line. So there's an awful lot of push up on the spring there. And it's on that corner. So what I can do at this point, I can take some of this off this corner here, you know, sort of round there, to reduce the push up on the spring at that point. You can see from that middle we're just under halfway. Ideally I want that to be the same there, like that. So I'm just going to take just a little bit off that corner. I'm just going to go and grind it off. Don't ever touch the spring once you're locked in like this, because you'll just mess everything up. But yeah, we can take some off that back there, just a little bit. You can also put a half stop on these as well. If you grind a flat onto the back of the blade there, and when the knife comes to that halfway point, it'll kind of lock, well not lock, but it'll kind of pause in that position, and then you can close it again. I never really see the benefit in having a half stop. I think someone mentioned it once before, you know, put a half stop in the knife. I just don't really see a benefit of doing that. I'd rather have the whole blade, you know, nicely tensioned under the spring. So I'll just go and grind that off and I'll show you. I'll come back and show you what I mean. I just took a little bit off that corner with 240 grit and just continued it round just to keep that nice radius. I will further go on to literally polish that, mirror polish on that, so it's nice and smooth. So now I'm just going to grind some more out the bottom of the spring here. So you're pretty safe there. I'm not taking too much off, maybe a millimetre. I just want to get an idea of this spring tension and the lock up and everything before I drill this last pin in. Yeah, well, put it on the grinder. I've taken that out there. I've just got to clean it up yet, but as again, I might have to remove a bit more. I'll just try it, see how that feels. That's okay. That feels nice. The blade's going to sit about there like that, so there's still tension on that spring at that point. Okay, just before I drill this, so we know that the blade is nice and tight with the spring open, but when you close this knife, this particular one, there is a little bit of play in the blade there that you can see, like that. It's not really a problem, but I don't really like a rattly blade. In actual fact, it will, when it hits the stop pin, it will lock it in that position. But there's still a tiny little bit of movement there, can you see? Now what will get rid of that if I just simply push that slightly, just ever so slightly that way. Watch what happens now. You take all of the play out of that blade completely. It's gone. Right, I've polished that face of the spring, the bearing face of the spring, and I've polished round here on the blade, on the buffer. I'm just going to test the actual movement. It's nice. It's really nice that. It's not so tight it can't be opened. Not so tight it can't be closed easily. It will relax this a little bit more when I've cleaned this up, because I'll take a little bit more out of this yet. There's quite a lot of tension on that spring, so probably more than this knife needs really, but that's okay. I'm not touching any of these faces again now. They're all in position. All I've got to do is put this hole in here for this stop pin for the blade to close against. There's a little stop pin. Got all our pins in. Before I do separate these, actually what I will do is I'll just rough out most of this shape on the bandsaw, and then I'll separate them, and then I can just grind it to final shape. There you go, cutting that on the bandsaw separated the super glue on that, which is why I kind of always leave the pins, as many pins as I can in, to hold the two pieces in place. I'm just going to clean up the burr on that edge, and I'm going to assemble this for you. I will come back in part 2 where I'll solder the brass bolsters to the front of the frame. I'll fit some wooden scales at the back, hopefully get all this lot cleaned up, get them assembled. A big thanks again to my patrons. See you all quite soon, guys. Hit the thumb or don't, up to you. Subscribe, like, whatever. Bye for now.